Welcome back to Boiler House Garage and to the sixth video in the 2014 Ford Fiesta ST series. You may remember in the introductory video that this ST had lived a hard life for 4 years prior to my ownership, and the previous owner hadn't done an oil change in all that time, covering 38,000 miles on the same oil. I did have to change it immediately and have done another change 3 months following that. In this video we're going to be changing it again for its third oil change in a year, but this time I'll film it for those of you that may wish to tackle this job for yourself. So firstly we have the oil filter, part number 1883037. The oil I'm using is the Ford recommended Castrol GTX Magnatec. However, I've opted for the 5W30 instead of 5W20, which is absolutely fine for this engine, and some suggest better on the Fiesta ST forums. Had I noticed this stupid carbon neutral crap on the bottle, I would have opted for a different brand. I mean, this is an engine oil, and yet they're still pandering to this pseudo-scientific agenda-driven fraud. Anyway, the Fiesta does have an awkwardly placed oil filter, and it is pretty much impossible to remove it by hand, so you'll certainly need a removal tool that can fit into this space. Does anyone know if the ST came with an undertray? It's pretty filthy under here with all the muddy rainwater, so if you have a Mark 7 ST or you work on them, please let me know in the comments. While I'm under here, I need to investigate a small oil leak that the guy who recently MOT'd the car told me about. It's leaked all over the drive shaft and run along to collect at the intermediate bearing where it's mainly dripping from. Another reason an undertray helps. If we look up here towards the bottom of the turbo, you can see a thicker concentration of oil oozing from that oil drain or return pipe, so that's where I'll have the remedy. I'll try tightening it up at the end of the video, but we'll stick to the oil change at hand for now. So at the back of the sump, which is this lattice area, is the drain plug. You'll need a 13mm socket or spanner to undo it, and it should only be done up to around 25 foot-pounds or 30 newton meters, or simply hand tight as most people would do. Once you've loosened the plug, it only needs a turn before it's finger loose, so you can get your drain panel tub ready and undo it by hand. I'll speed this up as the Fiesta sump plug has a lot of thread. No bad thing for preventing leaks and giving you some warning if it starts to come loose. Be prepared for drips of oil to fall directly downwards, but the main flow of oil is exiting sideways. Always protect your drive with a sheet of cardboard or thick ground sheet, as spillage is pretty much inevitable when you're not using a ramp and a professional drainer tank. This will still have some of the 38,000 mile oil in it, now with another 10,000 or so on top of that, so it will be some time before the condition of the oil returns to a good colour. With the drain plug wiped down, you can see that Ford aren't using copper washer types and instead have this one with a reusable rubber seal. These plugs can of course be replaced whole, and there are some Mount Tune and Voodoo branded magnetic replacements to choose from if you prefer, which will attract small particles and keep them out of your oil galleries. Now the oil is drained, we can put the plug straight back in by hand and give the area a wipe down of any remaining drips of oil. As I said earlier, retighten with a 13mm socket and either torque to around 25 foot-pounds or just by hand. My usual guide from my previous videos of tightening a quarter turn once you feel the plug touching home is different here because of the rubber seal. This will be tight enough at around an eighth of a turn, so it's more like an oil filter. Now it's time to remove the oil filter with the tool you're using. For access, I fit the ratchet after putting the tool in place to get around this pipe. Please see my review video for this Halford's Advanced Oil Filter Removal Tool, which does get the filter loosened off better than the strap type that I used last time. Like the sump plug, the filter just needs to be slightly undone for you to undo the rest by hand. You will have to undo it slowly and get your drain pan at the ready, as oil will leave the sideways mounted filter and run onto the remote housing. This is messy, but it's better it run down here than down your sleeve, so keep your fingers as far back as possible and gradually undo it. I need both hands here to pull that annoying pipe out of the way so I can get the body of the filter out and away. See what I mean about keeping the oil away? There's not a spot of it on my arm. To prepare the new filter, it's good practice to smear a small amount of oil onto the seal and the centre thread, but I imagine there'll be plenty of oil spilt onto the housing even after giving it a wipe down. You won't be able to fill the new filter with oil as it doesn't mount upside down. You can only physically do this on upward facing filters. Now again, I can't film my holding the pipe out of the way to get the filter in position. You can spin the filter on and tighten it by hand and it should go on with very little resistance. They're not likely to cross thread, but it's tricky to force it on with all this pipework in the way. I should look to spin this clip round and face the other way to stop it digging into my flesh. I'll just swap hands to tighten it with my stronger right. It will be difficult to over tighten from this angle, so once it's as much as I can manage, it will be tight enough. A quick wipe up should also be done, as it can be alarming to see drips of oil post oil change, just so you know that everything is leak free. Well, apart from that leaky oil pipe we'll be looking at in just a bit. Now to fill with Castrol GTX, which is apparently carbon neutral, don't you know? Maybe I'll burn the old oil to offset this bullshit. I don't have a funnel on me, so I'm going to pour the oil as carefully as possible and try not to spill any. Oops, well there's a bit gone. But if you hold the bottle sideways as much as you can, it's supposed to stop the oil from doing this. I'm aiming to refill with 3.5 litres of oil, as this car has a 4 to 4.1 litre capacity and will probably be holding nearly a litre around its oil galleries and pipework, going to the remote filter and turbo. However, because the oil filter itself is empty, the half litre should make up that shortfall. Plus I want to try and get the level right in one so I don't have to make another mess trying to top up without a funnel. It's not quite held flat here, but there's over a litre left. I've probably gone a little over with 1.25 remaining. We'll find out on the dipstick in just a moment. The ST's dipstick is weird, as oil splashes all over the thing when you remove it, and you need to wipe the whole length, place it back all the way, then pull it back out to get a glance of the oil level. It's bang on maximum at the moment, but there's probably a bit left to trickle down into the sump to show a slight overfill. It's not going to need any more at least, so I'm going to clean up the small bit of spillage by removing the engine cover and wiping off where it's collected. In fact, if, unlike me, you're a clever guy, you'd have taken the engine cover off and put the rag down before attempting to pour it without a funnel. I noticed one of the coil lead clips was loose, so I'm glad I've taken the cover off now. I'll need to change the plugs below them by next year, as the car will be 10 years old and require a major service, including a cam belt that I'm really not looking forward to doing. Now for another check of the oil before starting. Remember, it's best to never fill past the max line and then top up after running the engine and thus oil pump for a short moment if it falls below that line. I've gone a little over as suspected, but this is my own car and the dry oil filter will be where the excess will first go as it's pumped from the sump. Now to start the engine and let it idle for a few moments. After about 30 seconds I'm going to gently rev the engine to a fast idle and then to about 3000 RPM. This is completely optional but gets the oil pressure up a bit higher than just leaving it to idle. In the past I've worked on a few classics that will clatter after an oil change until a good bit of pressure has been reached, and it's better to see if anything is amiss before driving off where you can't see it. I'm leaving it to idle for another 30 seconds, then check the level again. This oddly positioned stick is covered again, but at least it has one, unlike a lot of modern cars. So now it's a few mil below, which means a lot of oil has moved, but because it has been run, the level should settle perfectly at maximum. Checking the fluids, I noticed the coolant is ever so slightly down, so that will need a top up of deionised water. The screen wash should be topped up while the bonnet's up, so I can use this ready to use berry scented screen wash. This was kindly donated, as I usually keep the concentrated stuff, otherwise the weight of all of the fast consumable fluids would get a bit cumbersome, but it is handy not having to mix. That's half of it gone already, and it smells a bit like an energy drink. Well, that just about wrapped things up for the oil change, if that's all you were watching for, but please stick around if you want to take a closer look at the leaking turbo oil return pipe. Please leave any questions, remarks or even criticisms in the comments below, and feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to upload a review video of the oil filter tool that I used here straight after this, so you'll get to see that today as well. For those not sticking around, thanks very much for watching. Now back to this annoyance. The oil pipe here appears to be held down by two T30 screws or bolts, and I'm going to try and see if nipping them up will slow the leak. There is, however, a chance it could make it worse. The top one has quite a bit of space around it for access, but the lower one we find the drive shaft in the way, so I need to get a few extension bars on the 1/4 incher and reach it that way. They both had over half a turn to go, but the problem is, if the gasket has failed rather than it just being the bolts coming loose, this will just serve to crush it to bits and make it leak just as fast, or if not more, but it's still worth a try as I'm under here. I'm cleaning up the area with a near depleted can of carb cleaner and a good wipe down with an old tea towel. Now to get a few shots of how it appears now, and I'll see the progression of the oil leak in due course, and most likely we'll have to replace the gasket or even the whole pipe. Until then, bye for now.